Greetings, I'm Zachary Hepner. Pleased to share this Dvar Torah with you for Parashat Korach and Parashat Chukat. The Academy-nominated 1984 film, The Natural, must have been written with ruach hakodesh, with divine inspiration, because it's a full-length feature movie summarizing this week's Dvar Torah. Roy Hobbs, played by Robert Redford, uses his self-made bat, Wonderboy, which has significant meaning for him, as it was crafted from a tree struck by lightning near his childhood home. The bat is depicted as having supernatural luster. Just replace the name Wonderboy with moftim, and the bat of Aharon with otot. However, in the climax of the film, during the final game, Wonderboy splits in two as Hobbs hits a foul ball. The batboy, whose name is Bobby Savoy, where Savoy resonates with the rational intellect, then brings Hobbs a replacement bat, the Savoy Special. Special indeed, like an ut or a sign. Hobbs uses this bat to hit the game-winning home run that shatters the stadium lights. I do hope you listen to this longer than usual Dvar Torah, but if you do tune out, please go see the movie and remember that Wonderboy is the bat that Moshe uses for wonders in Exodus, and Savoy Boy is Aaron's bat, the bat that produces almonds in Parashat Korach. The dilemma and resolution at the end of the natural echoes the dilemma Moshe faces in Parashat Chukat, but with very different results. And thank you to Bernard Malamud for such an enriching story about baseball and how it links to Parashat Korach and to Parashat Chukat. This week's Dvar Torah spans two parashiot, from Korach all the way to the episode at Merivah. The narrative of Korach spans from Numbers 16 to number 17. The Merivah narrative is in Numbers 20. There is no narrative in between, it's all laws. And while this observation is original, it helps support the view of Chizkuni, whom we'll go to shortly. While every letter of the Torah, including the laws of the Torah, between Korach and Merivah, are of course theologically omni-significant, if we were to read the narrative as if it were in Ein Yaakov, which is a Talmudic collection that omits laws and only includes Agadah, the connections between the narratives suddenly jump out of the parchment. Numbers 16. It begins with Korach and his delegates and their audacious appeal to usurp some sort of leadership role. The details are debatable, however. Numbers 16 concludes with the miraculous death of Korach and his entourage. Numbers 17 is the aftermath of what had initiated before Korach had died. The challenge of the fire pans, the mob hysteria, God threatening to wipe out the nation with a plague, and Moshe's appeasing God successfully. Numbers 17. It concludes with the episode of the 12 dry branches. 12 branches are left overnight. Aharon's name is written on the branch representing Levi. In the morning, 11 branches remain dry, while Aharon's branch had blossomed and produced almonds. Moshe is told to retrieve Mateh Aharon levet Levi, vayotze perach, vayatze tzitz, vayigmosh gedim. He's told to take it. This miracle demonstrates that Levi, the tribe of Levi, was chosen to serve God with temple service, to the exclusion of the others. God commands that the blossomed staff be placed in the tabernacle as an ut, as a sign, and remembrance for B'nai Meri, which is simply translated as rebellious ones. Then two more verses are devoted to public hysteria that everyone is going to die. Now let's skip to Numbers 20 in Parashat Chukat with the episode at Merivah, when Moshe hits the rock. Now, skip all the laws in between, Numbers 18 and Numbers 19, which lead us to Parashat Chukat. First, Miriam dies. The Israelites fear they will perish of thirst. Moses is told to take the staff and speak to the rock at Merivah to produce water. Moshe hits the rock, water is produced, then both Moshe and Aharon are punished. Ya'an lo he'emantem bi. You did not increase or produce emunah in me. He'emantem. They are sentenced to die before entering the Holy Land. These two narratives are separated by laws, but should be read as one continuous narrative. In Korach, the staff is Aaron's staff, but whose staff is being used at Merivah? Presumably, it's Moshe's staff. Recall that Moshe had a staff in Parashat Beshalach, and he uses it to hit the rock to produce water. This is the same staff Moshe had used to produce moftim, wonders, Wonderboy, before Pharaoh. Many Mefarshim claim that the staff at hand, no pun intended, is the same staff Moshe had used to hit the rock in Exodus at Marah, in Shmot 17. Vihikita batsur, you shall strike the rock. This is supported by Moshe's calling the Israelites Shimuna Hamorim, listen, O rebels, which resonates with Marah, the same that location in Exodus 17. However, let's now go to the Chizkuni. The Chizkuni says, Kach et hamateh, ze mateh shel Aharon, dehadichtiv vayikach Moshe et hamateh milifnei Hashem, v'zehu maklo shel Aharon. Chizkuni first says, the staff is Aharon's staff, for it says, Moshe took the staff from before Hashem. This is Aaron's staff. What is before Hashem? It's the staff in the tabernacle. Chizkuni is also good at intertextuality. He further connects the narratives. V'od shemaklo shel Aharon haya ot livnei Meri v'hainu da'amar Moshe shimuna hamorim. He links Mary, B'nai Meri, and Hamorim, that Moshe calls the Israelites B'nai Meri. Moshe calls the congregation. God calls them. Moshe calls the congregation Hamorim. God tells Moshe to take the staff from Milifnei Hashem, namely the one in the tabernacle. Chizkuni notes that Aaron's staff is an ot, similar to the Tefillin Shel Yad, which is also an ot al yadcha. In this case, it's an ot for rebellious groups. It's a sign for them. Moshe inferred that, and therefore, that's why Moshe called them Shimuna Hamorim. Listen, you, O rebels. Morim also, parenthetically, resonates with Miriam, Moshe's deceased sister, whose death precipitated, no pun intended, the drought. Further intertextual links include the complaint in Numbers 17 with the complaint in Numbers 20. Hen gavanu, lo, we perish. We are lost. We are all lost. In Numbers 20, velu gavanu, if only we had perished when our brothers perished before Hashem. Hen gavanu resonates with velu gavanu. We still have not gotten to the crime. What was the tit and what was the tat? If the staff was Aharon's, was Moshe striking the rock a sin? Common question is, why was Aharon even punished? He didn't hit any rock, and was instructed by God to assemble the congregation with Moshe, and he did that. Perhaps Aharon ought to have known that his staff was an ot bat, not a baseball bat. Moshe took the staff from the Ohel Moed locker room, where it was placed as a show and tell, ot, sign. Aharon had nothing to do with Moshe taking the staff. Now Moshe and Aaron, they were punished lo he'emantem bi, for not increasing faith with the people. The word emunah is used previously in Bahalotcha, which is Numbers 12, describing how Moshe tends his flock like a nursemaid. In Chukat, Moshe had violated some sort of emunah, but what infraction actually took place? Moshe and Aharon were victims of entrapment, divine entrapment. The complainers at Meriva say, Velu gavanu, if only we had perished when our brothers perished before Hashem. Shadal says, before Hashem, means that others had died a sudden death, which is better than dying of thirst. But before Hashem is referring to those who had a quick and sudden death. That's Korach's narrative. Yitzchak Shmuel Reggio explicitly links the fast-track death wish in Meriva to the fast-track death in the Korach narrative. So far we've connected and linked Korach to the Meriva narrative. They are linked, but let's talk a bit about Aharon's staff, because God does not call the Israelites rebellious, but rather the staff should be preserved as an ot for B'nai Meri, L'mishmeret, Lo'ot, Livnei Meri, to be kept as a sign for the children of rebellion. That's in Numbers 17, verse 25. It behooves us to discuss the often overlooked word ot. We see that the mixed views on what ot actually is may have misled Moshe onto what to do with that staff. Rashi says that the ot was a proof, simply to silence dissent. And Ramban says that the ot is a miraculous sign. It proves that God performs miracles. This applies to all otot, according to Ramban, including the tefillin, which are reminders of God's omnipotence. However, there are views that an ot in Korach is a specific proof that God assigns authority to his leaders. And this view is suggested by the Rav, and the Maharal, and Malbim, and Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Now place yourself for a moment in Moshe's sandals. The Korach rebellion had just ended. Moshe and Aharon's authority is asserted. An ot is placed into the tabernacle for the B'nai Mary. When God commands Moshe to take the staff, is God referring to the staff in Exodus, or perhaps to the staff only a few verses earlier? God tells Moshe to take the staff, but he doesn't say which staff to take. The complaints are the same. Both groups complain with the same language, hen gavanu, velu gavanu. Moshe thought to compare apples to apples. Same complainers, same complaint, take out the same staff. That's Aharon's staff, the staff that's called the ot. However, it's not comparable, and this is how it's different. In Korach, there was a rebellion, and there were also complainers. The complainers were anxious about their security. The rebels wanted to rebel. In Merivah, there were complainers but no rebels. The complainers were so anxious that they were pining for a swift death, not a slow death. That's not a complaint of a rebel, but of someone who needs more emunah, more bitachon. That's trust in God. Someone who needs a divine nursemaid and assurance that the God who took you out of Egypt will also quench your thirst. Moshe took the wrong staff. He went to the wrong locker room and took the ot staff for rebels when he should have taken out the miracle staff from Exodus. The same staff that produced miracles before Pharaoh would have been a sign that they will not die of thirst. Moshe hit the rock, but Moshe missed the mark. He added the letter Hey. He called the Israelites not just Morim, rebels, but Hamorim, turning it from descriptive term into a prescriptive term, turning an adjective into a noun, from rebellious to the rebels. Hamorim versus Morim. In number 17, God utilizes Aaron's staff as an ut for B'nai Mary, descriptive, not prescriptive, a pedagogical show and tell for those who are rebellious today or maybe become rebellious in the future. B'nai Mary is not the same as Hamorim. B'nai Mary is a degree of separation. For those feeling rebellious, visit the Ohel Moed Museum and look at Aharon's staff with its blossom and almonds in contrast to demonizing a group as active rebels. Moshe and Aharon are denied entry into the Holy Land as a punishment, not for instilling the flock with more emunah, and for misjudging the people as rebels when they were merely anxious. The miracle of a dry staff producing blossoms is a small miracle before God, and it should be used to teach future generations. The miracle of producing water at Merivah is also not difficult for God, but it should have been used as a lesson and an opportunity to bring the Israelites closer to Him and increase their emunah, not to tell them off, making them feel disconnected from Hashem. And that's what's called a missed opportunity. Hamorim versus B'nai Mary. Now there's more. Remember the 4 expressions of Geula in Shemot 6 that correspond to the 4 cups of wine we drink on the night of Pesach? V'hotzeti, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. And I will take you out, and I will save you, and I will redeem you, and I will take you. V'lakachti is followed by v'heveti, I will bring you. The 4th expression, v'lakachti, is actually v'lakachti etchem li la'am v'hayiti lachem le'elokim, and I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. That's in Exodus chapter 6. Before veheveti, before I will bring you into the land, we must be God's people, and he must be our God. In other words, the complainers who are anxious need more emunah, not just for the water, but they need more emunah for Hashem. The water comes from Hashem. Once they are properly imbued with emunah, they will be ready to veheveti, to enter the land. Moshe and Aharon, were charged with the task of making Hashem their God. The tit for tat is, if you get the people to have emunah, they and you will merit entry into the land. Veheveti. Emunah is a prerequisite for veheveti. Moshe's staff was the staff for emunah. Aharon's staff was an ot, a sign for rebellions. At the end of Beshalach, when Moshe raises his arm during the battle with Amalek, his arms were v'hiadav emunah ad bo hashamesh, and his hands were full of emunah, or they were faithful, or they were reliable, until the sun set. That's in Shemot 17. His arms provided emunah to the warriors until nightfall. Had the narrative of Numbers 17 and number 19 been juxtaposed directly, it truly would have been entrapment. God said to take the staff, so Moshe took one, mentioned 3 verses earlier. But there were 2 chapters of laws in between. Moshe was confused. Which staff? The staff that deters rebels, or the staff that adds emunah? Moshe mistook the complainers for rebels. Complainers are not rebels. They are frightened, and they're in need of the Almighty more than ever. Moshe chose the wrong staff, called them rebels, and missed an opportunity. I don't blame Moshe. It was a confusing task. He misread the crowd. Rebels need direction and enlightenment. They need an ot. Complainers need assurance and emunah, a very different prescription. Moshe was punished for lo ha'emantem bi, you did not increase emunah, not for how the miracle played out, but for not using the event as an opportunity to increase the national emunah. As we go through life, we need enlightenment and leadership. We also need reassurance and security. The lesson is that Savoy boy has its place, and when used properly, it hits a home run or a homeland run. But most of the time, we need Wonderboy, the emunah relationship that assures us that God's batting average is perfect and reliable. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.